5 parts dealing with particular phases in the life of hero Morgaya. The first part portrays Morgaya's career as a small-time money lender doing his business under a banyan tree in front of the centered Cooperative Morgaya Bank in Malgudi. The meeting of Morgaya with Dr. Pal makes and mars Morgaya's life. The second part tells about the meteoric rise of Morgaya to Himalayan heights of glory and prestige after he gets a book on sexology written by Dr. Pal and publishes it with the generous cooperation of Mr. Made Lal, the owner of the Garden Printery. The third part deals with Morgaya's efforts to get his son Balu pass SSC examination. Failure helps Balu to disappear him from home. Morgaya, however, succeeds in recovering his son. The fourth part deals with Balu's marriage with Brinda, the daughter of a rich tea estate owner of Mempi. Morgaya launches an attractive deposit cum interest scheme. The scheme creates ripples in the financial world, emptying many well-established financial institutions. Morgaya is at the peak of financial and social glory. The fifth part deals with Morgaya's fall from the height of glory after his bloody encounter with Dr. Pal, the residence of his son, Balu. Morgaya has to refund all the deposit with him and he is left a desolate bankrupt. All his property is confiscated and he remains to pauper. The novel thus delineated the meteoric rise and fall of an extraordinary financial wizard. 8. Discuss the significance of the title The Financial Expert. ANS. The Financial Expert is the story of a proud moneylender. Morgaya. The rise and fall, the pain and agony he of protagonist are aptly described in the novel. It is the story of a financial expert who was once a proud one but later in his life lost almost everything and had to start from scratch all over again. The storyline hence well justifies the title. The lucid style and intense storytelling of R.K. Narayan further makes The Financial Expert a saga of reality. During his journey to be a writer, he wrote for various magazines and The Hindu. At that time he falls in love with a girl who subsequently becomes his wife. In his lifetime he wrote 15 novels, 5 volumes of short stories, a number of travelogues and collection of non-fiction, English translation of Indian epics, and the memoirs, My Days. All these have created a strong base for R.K. Narayan in world literature. People connected with art and literature readily remember his name with his make-believe place Malgudi. The Financial Expert was the first of his works published in the United States in the year of 1952. This is also created at the backdrop of Narayan's fictitious village Malgudi. The protagonist here is a financial expert, Morgaya. He is a man of many hopes but consequently he has a few resources. He usually spends his time under a banyan tree and distributes financial advice to those willing to pay for his knowledge. He is a man of many ambitions or high hopes. Narayan incorporated his style of storytelling into his character Morgaya. He brings forth the rich imagery of Indian life with all the absorbing details and also intense storytelling. This book traces the rise and fall of Morgaya. He is proud, imaginative moneylender. In due use of time, with all ups and downs in light, he becomes rich but darkness comes in his own life as his son becomes spoiled. When he lost all his money, his son denies to sit under the banyan tree, so at his old age he himself decides to sit under the tree and starts all over again. The Financial Expert truly illustrates the humorous aspects in life. Though in The Financial Expert, there is a hidden touch of comedy, but it also carries the innermost meaning of life, that we come alone in this world and we have also to go alone. No one is there to help out. This story tries to delve deep in our life and show the innermost truth. 2. Write short notes on the following in about a page. 1. Dr. Pal. ANS. One of the key figures in the book, The Financial Expert, is Dr. Pal. He has a really complicated personality. He gave Margaya unselfish assistance as he rose to success. He offered him the draft. 38. Evershine. Of his book, Bed Life, in exchange for a pitiful quantity of money. He wanted him to make a lot of money off the book. He is a journalist and has a wealth of knowledge. In the beginning, we witness his ambitious side where he tells Margaya about his plan to launch a sociology clinic for solving domestic problems of husband and wife. He told him he was a sociologist. Margaya finds his ideas vulgar. Pal has no regard for a settled life. He has no fixed aim in life. He lives like a vagabond. He holds rational thoughts and emotions play no role. Perhaps that's why he didn't marry. Money is not his concern, and if he wanted money, he could earn a lot. It is undisputed because his one book brought immense wealth to Margaya. He could write more books, but his changing interests or lack of focus prevented him to lead a stable life. He was revered as a learned man. Interestingly, Pal became both the cause of Margaya's success and undoing. Pal involves Baloo in immoral activities which infuriated Margaya and he attacked him. Later, Margaya came to know that Pal was Baloo's companion and he indulged him in playing cards, drinking alcohol and womanizing. Margaya knew Pal's might and he was thinking of sending Pal to another city for some errands to protect his son from his bad company, but the plan didn't work out. Ultimately, Margaya's spar with Pal ended with disastrous implications for Margaya and he lost all his wealth and became poor. It can be said that the character of Pal was not a simple or a conventional one. He has some merits but some flaws as well. His flaws became the reason for parting with Margaya. 2. Baloo. ANS. Baloo is the only child of his parents, Margaya and Meenakshi. He is born after 12 years of their marriage. He is the only child. But his father is always busy with his financial transactions. He has neither the time nor the intention to come back home in time to spend a few moments of leisure with his son. His mother is busy with the domestic chores and has hardly any time for him. Thus, 39. Baloo grows neglected and isolated in his early childhood. This has an adverse impact on his later growth. Baloo turns into a stubborn and obstinate child because of the utter negligence by his parents. He runs away with his father's valuable accounts book and throws it into the gutter and stands there smiling. He reaps the childish joy by teasing his parents. Baloo hates books, studies, teachers and schools. He failed the 10th examination despite tuition at home. Margaya encourages his child to insult his teachers. He becomes the secretary of the school. He instigates him to boss others. Baloo's teachers are in the awe of him as he is the son of the secretary of the school. His teachers solve his questions and get him good marks only to keep their job intact. Baloo drinks and wastes money lavishly in restaurants. This is perhaps the biggest blunder committed by Margaya. When the boy performs badly, Margaya shouts wildly at him and the boy runs away to freedom in Madras. He dictates his terms which his father religiously observes after his return to Malgudi. He is married to Brinda only to be corrected. Baloo is left free to do whatever he likes. He comes under the evil influence of Dr. Pal. He indulges himself in drinking, gambling, womanizing and smoking. He remains away from home till midnight. He demands the share of his property in a threatening way. He speaks the language of a hooligan or ruffian. At the instance at Dr. Pal, Baloo witnesses against his father for latter's assault on Dr. Pal. Baloo is rudderless and aimless. He has no achievements, except his father's unbounded wealth, that too he loses towards the end. Margaya cannot be absolved of the responsibility of spoiling his son. He is callously indifferent to the fatherly duties of upbringing a child. 3. Meenakshi. Ans. Margaya's wife named Meenakshi is a modest, homely and traditional woman. She is untouched by any sort of ambition. Her circle of worries is circumscribed by domestic chores, welfare of her husband and her son Baloo, and a moderate desire for money which is enough to pull them through. This aspect of her personality 4. N. comes in glaring contrast with that of her husband, who is relentlessly obsessed by an unlimited desire for money. His insatiable avarice for money is described by the author like the desire of a fanatical mountaineer who sets his heart on reaching the summit of Everest. He might be standing on the highest peak, yet he can never feel that he has attained the highest. Their contrasting attitudes in this regard become more pronouncedly clear in the reaction that each one shows when their son Baloo runs away from home. Margaya is able to withstand the loss of his son because of the external strength and prowess he gets from his wealth. His possession of wealth has supplanted a natural fatherly instinct for the truant son. His rank materialistic attitude is depicted in strong words. Margaya asks his wife to demand from him any amount of money because he thinks that money will divert her attention from the son's loss. But he is sadly mistaken in this regard, as she spurns his proposal, saying, "What will I do with money?" Margaya's wife is a patient, tolerant person who bears the occasional overbearing moods and tantrums of her husband. She asks Margaya about Baloo when he comes in the kitchen where she is busy cooking something. He replies to her ill-temperedly, probably rolling in the gutter. She remains cool-headed to the exchange of hot words that takes place between Margaya and his son. When the latter has failed repeatedly in the SSLC, she knows that her husband has become more peremptory in his manners because of his affluence. She attributes his temperamental irascibility to overwork and tension he has to undergo in his profession. Her accommodating and peaceful disposition is evident in her understanding that the best way to attain some peace of mind in life was to maintain silence. Ultimately, she found that things resolved themselves in the best manner possible or fizzled out. She proves very helpful to Margaya during his penance for 40 days undertaken by him for the propitiation of goddess Lakshmi. Sometimes, a quarrel takes place between the two, but generally she avoids such scenes. He spends 100 rupees out of the 200 rupees he has got. He hopes that he will get money as a miracle immediately after the conclusion of the puja. He does not move out of the house in pursuit of earning. She urges upon him to go out of the house to earn something. A quarrel ensues between the duo over this point. Further, Margaya tells her that he is giving up the publication of the book, Domestic Harmony, for 2 reasons. First, the sale of the book has gone down. Secondly, the book is vicious and corrupting for the young minds, and hence he does not want his name to be associated with it any longer. Her love for her only son, Baloo, is inexhaustible. She gives birth to him a decade after her marriage. She undergoes a course of penance and hardship for the well-being of the child. She, along with her husband, goes to the god at Tirupati, dressed in a saffron-dyed sari, had carried the infant in arms and walked behind him, as he went to 10 houses and begged alms. There are other instances in which she reiterates her deeply affectionate feeling for the son. She quarrels with her husband for his negligence in not protecting the child after Baloo's repeated failures in the SSLC. She prepares for him extra nourishing dishes and gives him extra dose of milk and fruits during the examination days, so that he is able to stand the strain. She remains lost in ideas about her son. Her condition is described in subtle words. The anonymous postcard bearing the news of Baloo's death tires out whatever patience is left in her. She weeps, cries and rolls over the floor. Her hair is untied and her eyes are swollen. She looks like a stranger, with her face swollen and disfigured with weeping. A number of women, neighbors, Margaya's brother and his sister-in-law gather round her in order to console her. She prevails upon Margaya to go to Madras to verify the news. Despite his unwillingness, he goes there and discovers Baloo in a cinema theater with the help of a police inspector whom he meets coincidentally in the railway compartment while traveling to Madras. He brings Baloo back home with a promise that he need not bother about the examination. He tells him, "You eat, rest and grow fat. That is all you are expected to do, and take as much money as you like." Evershine. Baloo's coming back home alive is a matter of unbounded joy for Meenakshi. The very style of her life undergoes a sea change. She is no more morose and reserved. She wears well, keeps cheerful, sticks jasmine flowers in her hair and looks youthful. She is all the time plying Baloo with her persistent enquiry, what else he likes to take. The transformation in her look and manner is well depicted. Baloo's departure from home after marriage for a new house in Lolly Extension makes her feel sad and lonely. Baloo goes to live there along with his wife, Brinda. Margaya arranges for a separate house for them against her will. He does it for two reasons. First, Baloo's wife is a modern girl who should live in a modern house in a new locality. Secondly, since Baloo is a grown-up young man, he should establish his own independent house. She is like Narayan's many women characters who remain contented with their household life and consider the fulfillment of the interests of their family as end in itself. Such women are, as a class, known by their homebound, traditional and conservative commitments. 4. Brinda. Ans. The other woman character in the novel is Brinda, the wife of Baloo. She is 17 years old. She is said to be extremely fair. Her father is the owner of a tea estate in Mempi Hills. He ekes out an annual income of 2,000 rupees from his tea estate. Margaya considers her to be a good match for his son. He induces the priest to declare the horoscopes of the two as compatible on a temptation of payment of extra fee. Hence, Brinda and Baloo are married. She gives birth to a child. While at Margaya's house, Brinda lives in peace with her mother-in-law. She remains confined inside her room with Baloo for the most part of the day. They lead a happy married life. She is equally respectful to her father-in-law, Margaya, when he visits them in their new house in Lolly Extension at night after his tiff with Baloo in his office during the day. He finds her alone there. She keeps on standing as a mark of respect to him while talking to him. Margaya has to ask her to sit. In spite of her good qualities, Brinda falls a victim to idle Baloo's evil habits. The company of Dr. Pal spoils Baloo thoroughly. Dr. Pal puts into his mind the notion of demanding 50% share in his father's property. A quarrel occurs between the father and the son over this issue. Baloo goes daily with Dr. Pal to a theater where they play cards, drink and freely mix with some women and return home very late at night. Brinda discloses these movements of Baloo to Margaya when the latter insists upon her to expose the facts to him. Margaya is just out of the main entrance of the house when Baloo gets out of Dr. Pal's baby Austin car at 2 o'clock in the night. There is some woman also in the car. Margaya loses control over himself and assaults Dr. Pal. He is put to harsh beating. Brinda does not feel agitated over this incident. She calmly opens the door to let her husband come in and puts off the light of the house. She is tolerant towards undesirable conduct of her husband. Brenda shows a remarkable capacity for adaptability to changing circumstances or to ups and downs of life. She moves to the new house without making any fuss about it. Similarly, she views Baloo's wrong activities with accommodating attitude so that the peace and normalcy of their household is maintained. She goes through mental suffering for the sake of peace at home. Moreover, when Margaya goes bankrupt and the new house has to be sold off, she returns Will Baloo to her in-laws' house. She shows no signs of sagitation over this unexpected mishap. She is unruffled and takes it as a part of life. Baloo is no match for her in qualities. His devilish nature gets more exposed vis-a-vis her gentleness and meekness. He goes from bad to worse after his marriage in the company of Dr. Pal. Margaya is proved wrong that he will improve after his marriage with Brenda. The author's central concern in this novel is to build up Margaya's character, who is queerly possessed with a desire for establishing a financial empire. He thinks no sacrifice greater than this cause. He seems to reach the crest at one time, but ironically, his so-called financial empire collapses in no time simply by his one misdoing, i.e. the beating of Dr. Pal, who later on spreads rumors against his financial transactions. He is reduced to insolvency and advises his son to start his career like him in front of the Central Land Mortgage. Evershine. Cooperative bank under the banyan tree. He goes through the full cycle of fate and meets the situation of square one. Viewed against such a thematic pattern, the role of women characters becomes secondary. Narayan, sometimes, depicts shadowy characters such as Margaya's mother. A reference is made to her once only in the novel. She is described to distribute free of charge a tooth powder prepared by her at home with burnt almond shell and cinnamon bark and alum. This voluntary, humanitarian act on her part shows her charitable disposition of mind. 5. Margaya as a symbol of greed. His real name was Krishna, but he was known as Margaya. He begins his career as a petty moneylender, doing his business under a banyan tree, in front of the Central Cooperative Land Mortgage Bank in Malgudi. He helps the shareholders of the bank to borrow money at a small interest and lend it to the needy at a higher interest. In the process, he makes money for himself. The secretary of the bank, Arul Das, the peon, sees from his box the loan application forms he has managed to get from the bank through its shareholders. They treat him with contempt and threaten to take action against him. Margaya is unable to carry on his business, after Baloo, his son, throws his account book into the gutter. It had all the entries of his business dealings with his clients. He presents his horoscope to an astrologer, who assures him that if he performs puja to Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, a wonderful time is coming for him. Ash from a red lotus and ghee prepared from milk from a grey cow are used in the 40-day puja. Margaya does the puja and emerges from it full of expectations for a successful future. Dr. Pal, who sells him the manuscript of a book named Bedlife, for whatever ready cash Margaya's purse contains, assures him that the book renamed Domestic Harmony will sell in tens of thousands if only he can find a publisher. Maiden Lal, a man from the north, reads the script and agrees to print and publish it on a 50-50 partnership basis. The book is at once popular and Margaya's fortune is made. Margaya is again ruined by his son, Baloo. He had put him to school in great style, getting the blessings of his brother and sister. In-law next door, his wealth had enabled him to become the secretary of the school managing committee. He had engaged a private tutor for his son and instructed him to thrash the boy whenever necessary. But Baloo was not good at his studies. He failed to pass SSLC. Margaya attempts to persuade him to take the examination a second time. The result is that Baloo seizes the school-leaving certificate book, tears it into 4 quarters, and throws them into the gutter, the same gutter which closed its dark waters over Margaya's Red Book of Accounts. Now it carries away the school certificate book. Then he runs away from home. A few days later, there is a letter from Madras telling Margaya that his son is dead. The brother's family immediately comes to his help, though Margaya feels he can do without their help and wonders whether this will change the existing relationship between them. He leaves for Madras and discovers through the good offices of a fellow traveler, a police inspector in plain clothes, that his son is not really dead, traces the boy and brings him home. He wants to marry him to a girl named Brinda, the daughter of the owner of a tea estate in Mempi Hills. When a pundit after an honest study declares that the horoscopes of Baloo and Brinda do not match, he is curtly dismissed with a fee of 1 rupee. Another astrologer, whom Dr. Paul finds, gives it in writing that the 2 horoscopes match perfectly and is paid 75 rupees for his pains. Money can dictate the very stars in their courses. Baloo and his wife are helped to set up an establishment of their own in Lali Extension. Margaya, wishing to draw Dr. Pal away from his son, seeks his help in attracting deposits from black marketeers on the promise of interest of 29%. If I get 20,000 rupees deposit each day and pay 15,000 rupees in interest, I have still 5,000 rupees a day left in my hands as my own, Margaya calculates. Margaya grows rich. It is now necessary for him to have a car. Every nook and corner of his house is stuffed with sacks full of currency notes. He is on the right side of the police, contributes to the war fund when driven to do so, and works day and night with his accounts and money bags, though his wife is unhappy at his straining himself so much. One day Margaya visits his son in Lali Extension. He finds Brinda and her child. The girl cannot hold back her tears while narrating Baloo's activities. When Margaya gets out of the house, he finds a car halting in front of it, out of which emerges Baloo. His companions are Dr. Pal and a couple of women of the town. The enraged father pulls Dr. Pal out of the car, beats him and dismisses the 2 women with contempt. The next day Dr. Pal, with a bandaged face, whispers to all and sundry that things are not going well with Margaya's concern. Hundreds of people come to Margaya and ask for their deposits. All the accumulated wealth is disbursed. Still hundreds of people cannot be satisfied. The run on the bank leads to Margaya's filing of an insolvency petition. And thus, like a house of cards, the wealth Margaya had accumulated is blown away. He advises his son to take his place under the banyan tree with the old box, and when he says, "How can I go and sit there? What will people say?" he replies, "Very well, then I will do it." The theme of the novel is lust for money, but Margaya is no monster of greed and wickedness. R.K. Narayan has succeeded in humanizing him and showing that, despite his lust for money, he is a human being like us. 6. Margaya's Red Book ends. Margaya begins his career as a petty moneylender, doing his business under a banyan tree, in front of the Central Cooperative Land Mortgage Bank in Malgudi. He helps the shareholders of the bank to borrow money at a small interest and lend it to the needy at a higher interest. In the process, he makes money for himself. The secretary of the bank and Arul Das, the peon, sees from his box the loan application form he has managed to get from the bank through its shareholders. They treat him with contempt and threaten to take action against him. This sets him on the path to improving his position. When Balu, his spoilt child, throws his account book, containing all the entries of his transactions with his clients, into the gutter, it becomes impossible for Margaya to resume his old practice. He shows his horoscope to an astrologer and is assured that a good time is coming for him if only he does puja to Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. The puja is done for 40 days. It's ash from a fed lotus and ghee made out of milk from a grey cow. Margaya goes through the puja and at the end of it is full of hopes of a prosperous career. Old Dr. Pal, who sells him the MS of a book on bed life, for whatever ready cash Margaya's purse contains, assures him that the book renamed Domestic Harmony will sell in tens of thousands if only he can find a publisher. Maiden Lal, a man from the north, reads the MS and agrees to print and publish it on a 50-50 partnership basis. The book is at once popular and Margaya's fortune is made. 7. The Secretary of the Bank. ANS. The Secretary of the Cooperative Bank is an up-to-date, strong person. When one day Margaya is about to pack up, the secretary appears before him. He is wearing a brown suit. His hands are in his pockets and behind him at a respectable distance stands Arul Das, the peon. He is very smart, with a hat on his head. He is a very tidy, young man. He looks as if he has just returned from Europe. He picks up a handful of papers from the box of Margaya and asks him how he came by the forms. He cautions him against keeping illegally the bank application forms, and threatens him with dire consequences, with handing him over to the police. The secretary has insulted Margaya. Margaya feels humiliated and contrasts his shabby figure, dirty dhoti and torn shirt with the smart appearance of the secretary, with fine dress and hat on. He is obsessed by him. He is always reminded of him whenever there is an issue of prestige or lowliness involved. Here is an example. The world was going to be transformed into one of shining. 48. Teeth. But a misgiving assailed him. How could he make people buy it rather than the dozen other tooth powders? He couldn't go about hawking it in the streets. It would be a fine lookout if the secretary of the Cooperative Society caught him at it. 8. Arul Das, the peon. ANS. Arul Das is the peon in the Cooperative Bank. He comes to Margaya on the instance of the secretary of the bank, and tells Margaya that his sahib has summoned him. Later, when Margaya offers him his old clothes, he tries to appease him and says that his sahib is a crooked person. Margaya feels humiliated when Arul Das warns him, and speaks very highly in regard to position of his boss, the secretary. Whenever the heart of the matter is the issue of prestige, he gets obsessed by this person. Here is an example of his obsession. He has thought of selling tooth powder when he is reminded of Arul Das. Arul Das would call out, "Hey, tooth powder, come here, give me a packet. Here are 3 pies," and he would have to gather the coppers like a beggar, with peals of laughter ringing out from the whole world.